Welcome, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys sharing with me the one thing you feel like you should automate. And like I said to you earlier, you're in the right place at the right time because today we're going to be talking about leveraging automations in money.com for nonprofits. My name is Aretha Simons. I'm the webinar producer here. I'm going to show you on the next slide how you can engage, although many of you already know this. But the most important thing I want to share with you, there's going to be a survey that's going to pop up. It's just two questions. When you close Zoom, it's going to pop up. If you can answer that question, I would greatly appreciate it. But on this next slide, if you could forward that slide for me, Alex. For those of you who need the closed caption, just tap on the CC button. If you have a question, please put them in the Q&A. Maybe quite a few of you here, but if you put it in the chat, we have some team members that can answer those for you. I think I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way and turn it over to Alex. He's going to tell you more about himself. Thanks for being here today, Alex.
Thank you so much, Aretha. It's always awesome to be working with the folks at TechSoup. So thank you very much for having us. And yeah, thank you one and all for joining. It's a really important topic. I feel like if we in nonprofits could automate our lives and have more time for the important stuff, the human stuff, it would make such a big difference. So as Aretha said, I will introduce myself in just a minute. I think what I'll do first is quickly run through the agenda that we have on the cards for the next 1 hour together. Of course, if you have any questions, though, we can go off script a little bit, and I'll be very happy to be led by any questions that anybody has. So I'll try and break a couple of different points throughout to cover all of your questions. So as I said, I'll start by introducing myself, and maybe more interesting than that, I'll introduce what the heck Monday.com is, because there may well be folks on today's call who have no idea what Monday even can do. So hopefully in this couple of intro slides, we can at least whet your appetite and get you a bit excited about maybe working further with Monday.com. I'll also explain how you can apply for free to our nonprofit program. That's really the clincher in this whole deal. It's a pretty amazing offer that I'm very privileged to be kind of representing. And you can get Monday.com without paying anything at all. There is no catch. We do not ask for a credit card. We don't start charging after a year. There's no trial. It's free. And I'll show you exactly how you can take advantage of that. And then our main focus is, of course, today, automations. I've got a lot of different automations that I'm going to show you, and they'll kind of touch on a couple of different use cases. So we'll talk about date reminder automations. We'll talk about moving items. We'll talk about ordering things by date. We'll talk about recurring tasks. That's a classic. We'll talk about automatically setting dates, and we'll talk about my favorite automation of all, which is the match automation. But if there are other things you're trying to automate, of course, like I said, let me know in the questions, and we can try and cover some of those. I guess my main sort of overall theme here is that once you've cracked automations in general on Monday.com, it's really easy to plug and play whatever your specific needs are, right? Maybe you're not looking exactly for a date reminder the way I'm going to build it, but once you've understood the kind of concept of how the automation works, the world is your oyster. The world is your oyster, and you'll be able to customize things very easily for whatever it is that you're looking for. Fabulous. So as I promised, I'll do a very quick intro of myself. It won't take more than a second. I'm Alex, or Alexander. You can already see a couple of familiar names in the chat, so good to see you again. And if this is anybody's first time on a session with me, welcome. It's nice to meet you. I am 3 years plus now at Monday.com as our nonprofit success manager, and meaning I work only with our nonprofit accounts. We have 22,000 active nonprofits, which is pretty amazing. And it's my job to make them and you be as successful as possible using this amazing platform. I come from the world of nonprofits and am well aware of the amazing impact that nonprofits can have. I think people working at nonprofits are superheroes. Truly well done. Every one of you is probably having an amazing impact in your community, but probably also doing it without the respect, time, money, resources, I could go on and on and on, that you maybe should have. So if we're able to make your day even a little bit easier, more automatic, then we're doing our job. So I'm very passionate about this work. Mostly I'm working with, large scale of many, mostly smaller organizations, but I have also worked kind of one-on-one with some of the organizations you can see on screen. And a fun fact about me, I am a sporting tragic, especially all those weird British colonial sports, cricket, rugby. I'm originally from New Zealand. I don't think I've missed a New Zealand rugby game, the All Blacks, if anyone's familiar. I don't think at least my entire adult life, I never remember missing one. So if anyone else is a sport fan, we can bond over that in a moment. But more interesting than me and my love of weird sports is what Monday.com can do for your organization. So probably by now you maybe know one or two sentences about this product, but maybe not more than that. People sometimes know Monday as a project management tool, but it's so much more than that. Really, it's a cloud-based software where you can build custom workflows. And that's quite a kind of a lofty way of putting it. But in more simple language, you can do almost any kind of work on Monday. Plan, run, track, processes, projects, everyday work, you name it. We have some of the biggest companies in the world among our 240,000 paying customers, Universal Studios, Coca-Cola, PayPal, I could go on and on. We also have, like I said, 22,000 nonprofits. Many of them are small, one-person operations. No matter what type of organizational company you are, Monday.com has a resource for you. And that's true of different use cases and industries as well. So whether you're managing donations or volunteers or projects, it fits, and there's more use cases being added all the time by creative people who are using Monday in their own fun ways to make the work easier. And what I'd really love to be able to achieve at the end of today's session isn't, like I said, it's not that you can completely perfectly replicate exactly every automation that I show you today. No, that's not my goal, because each of these automations could well be partly what you're looking for, but it's unlikely to be 100% spot on what you're trying to do. Rather, what I'm hoping to achieve in the next hour is that you'll feel confident to go and build these automations on your own, play with these things and make them do the work that you need them to do. Every automation can be customized and built in its own unique way. And I hope that after today's session, you know how to do that. And if you don't, where you can get a bit more help along the way. So I think that's it from my slideshow. What I'm going to do next is show you monday.com/nonprofits, which is our mini site. And on this page, you will find everything you need to know about our nonprofit offering. Now, really, it's a two-step process to actually create your monday.com account and to get on the nonprofit program. By the way, if anyone is already on our nonprofit program and already uses Monday, that's amazing. You can let us know in the chat if you're happy with the offering. And if this is anybody's first time seeing any of this stuff, welcome along. We'll paste in a minute 2 links in the chat so that you can actually do some of the stuff yourself. The first step, like I said, is to open your monday.com account. And the link will be pasted in the chat in a moment where you can do that. Everybody in the world can get a 2-week free trial by opening their Monday account. You could be like Elon Musk, the CEO of the company. You get a 2-week kind of trial period to see if you like it. And after those 2 weeks are done, for most people, they have to then start paying. For nonprofits, you can visit this page, our eligibility page, which again, we'll paste in the chat in just a moment. And in this page, you can apply to have that account that you've just created join our nonprofit program. If you are eligible, and you can check out our eligibility criteria down here, we've tried to make it easy enough to understand and fair while also keeping us safe, but it's not like 100 pages of legal text. If you are eligible, you will receive, by default, 10 seats for free. So you and 9 colleagues can all use Monday in the same account. If you're a bigger organization, you can get a big discount off any extra seats that you need to buy. So 70% reduction. Sometimes people mishear my accent and think I'm saying 17. That would be maybe more in line with what most people are offering, but no, 70% discount. And that's our second highest tier of service, Pro tier. It comes with an unlimited number of boards. So if you're managing tasks, donors, volunteers, projects, events, all that stuff is unlimited. But there are a few features which are only available on the top tier, which is Enterprise. If you do need to upgrade to enterprise, you can do that also with a nice discount of 33%, which is pretty awesome. Thanks very much to Aretha, who has pasted the links in the chat. You can see first step, second step there. The first step is the most important. Get into the system. The second step, you can do it at really any point. And if you've already got an account or you didn't know about the nonprofit program, or maybe your trial has expired, it's also okay. We can switch over any account onto the nonprofit program, assuming you fill out the application form here and are found to be eligible. So welcome along. I hope you're all busy creating your accounts. It's a really awesome offering. And like I said, 22,000 nonprofits are already taking advantage of this great solution. So that's a little bit about me, about what Monday can do, and about what we offer for nonprofits. Let's now get into the nitty-gritty of what an automation on Monday.com looks like. So what I've got here is a pretty simple task management board. And I thought what we could do is start off by looking at some automation on this board. This board, by the way, is a template that you can download. You can find a whole bunch of templates here in the template center. But this one actually comes from an external resource called mondayspaces.com. But you're welcome to check out the template center if you've got a Monday account already. You can download as many templates as you want from here, tons of different categories. There's even a nonprofit category, but you are able to download as many of these templates as you want. They are all free, both here in the in-platform template center and at mondayspaces.com, which is where this one came from. Now, the automations in Monday live up here, next to the little icon of the robot. And maybe the very first thing we should say is, what is an automation? It's basically something which will happen according to your desires. You set it up and control it, but without you needing to lift a finger. An automation is going to be unique to a board. So right now we're looking at our weekly task board. If I was to add an automation in Monday.com, it would be on this board and it would only apply to things happening here on this board. That's not to say you can't have cross-board automations, right? It could do something here which sends an item to another board, for example, but the automation, will live on one specific board. This is where its home is. This is where it's going to be triggered. And an automation is created by one person. So if you leave the organization and you want to pass the ownership of this automation on, you can do that as well. This board currently has 0 automations active and running on it, but we're going to change that in a big way. Now, the first automation I'm going to show you is a very important one, and probably the most simple automation that there is. We'll come here to the automation center, and we could choose from one of these pre-built automation recipes. And you can see there are tons of recipes here you can choose from. They're also categorized as well. But we'll get to that. I want to show you how we're going to build our first automation from scratch. We're going to build it out from 0. And an automation, whether it's simple or complicated, something you've built yourself or a template, will always follow the same basic structure. When this happens, there has to be some kind of action, a trigger. Something needs to occur for an automation to begin. An automation can't say, look at my board, see how many items have this status and react. No. An automation relates to something happening. We call this the trigger. So a very straightforward automation to understand. Here you can see some of the triggers that we can use. But a very simple automation to get us started would be when a status changes to something. The action, then the thing that's going to happen as a result of this automation launching, we could choose, for example, move item to group. And I think the most classic automation of this type would be when you're working with tasks, like we were on that previous board, to move the items that have been marked as done to a special group called the done group. Now, when I click on these underlined, grayed out words, this is where I need to provide a little bit more specific information, right? When status changes, which status? So when I click here, it's showing me all of the potential status columns on my board. Now, if you've customized your board and built them of your own, you will see those columns there as well. Keep in mind that a status column by type can be used to track all sorts of different things, right? We could add a status column to show, I don't know, which state someone lives in. Arkansas, Alabama, Kansas, and they could be listed as our statuses, right? They're not a classic status showing when a task has been finished, but it would appear here because it's of the type of column of the status column. But this one we're going to look at here is classic status column. And when I click here on something, it's got all the values of this specific column. Now, some of these, by the way, are customizations that I've already made. I added to the solution. Done working on it and stuck are the kind of classic straight out of the box values. We've added a few more that you're also completely able to add on your own as well. So when status changes to done, what do we want it to do? We want it to move to which group? We want to move it to the group called done. Very straightforward. We just created our first automation. We can check off our first automation right here, right now. You can see in this view, everything I need to know about the automation. I can see when it was last changed, or in our case, created, who created it. I can add a description, right? If you end up with a lot of long, complicated automations, just a very quick label can be quite helpful. Done to done, maybe something like this, just to help us remember which one is which. I can toggle my automation here on or off. And in the three dots, I have a bit more information. I can make a small change if I made a mistake. And click here on edit. Oh, I didn't mean to move it to the done group. I meant to move it to this week. Of course, that's not true, but you can make those changes here as well. We can also simply duplicate it. If you want to make a small change, you can duplicate and then edit. We can save this as a template, right? If I save this as a template and give it a name like done to done, this will now live in that automation center. Next time we go to create an automation from there, we can see probably, I hope, this automation living as a template in our automation center that we can then add to other boards in our account, which is a massive time saver if you're trying to work across multiple boards with similar or even the same automations. We can also see the history of this automation, right? Like how many times it's run. We can delete it, or as I said earlier, we can transfer ownership. So if you want someone else in your team to be the master of this automation and be able to make their own changes, you can do that as well. Up here, we can change the views. If you end up with a lot of automations, some people prefer to have this more kind of streamlined view, but it's completely up to you which one of these two styles you look at. So that's the basics of a simple automation. Why don't we now see it in action? Why don't we actually take a look at this one? Now, the first thing you might notice is that we've got this item here, sign the new lease contract for our distribution center. Okay, this is one of the things maybe our nonprofit does. We distribute food to people in need. We've already marked this task as done back on the 8th of June, and yet it hasn't moved down into the done group. Now, I don't know how it was when you started on Monday.com, or if you are a brand new user, maybe you are sitting there saying, aha, Alex's automation didn't work. And that's certainly the way I first behaved when I saw Monday.com. But it's because I didn't understand at that time the fundamental nature of the automation. Remember what I said before about the automation always being based off a trigger. Something needs to happen before it's going to move. This was already marked as done before we added the automation. So for it to be triggered, it needs to change to done, not be already labeled as done. Your automation doesn't go back to your board, look at what's going on, and make changes. It's triggered only when the thing happens that you've said should be the trigger actually occurs. So we can easily trigger this automation. We just need to move it to any other status. and then mark it as done. And now it should, confetti will fly, move down to this group. You'll also see a little pop-up here which says an automation moved an item to the group. And we can click on the word automation to see that and remember what caused that action to happen, because we've only got one automation right now. It's pretty easy to keep track of things, but as your automation list grows, sometimes things are moving around all the time, and it can be helpful just to be able to see exactly where that one came from. Amazing. So we just created our first automation, my friends. I'm very proud. We've got a long way to go, though. There's still many more automations I'd love to show you. The next automation number 2, it's also going to be on this board. I'm actually going to show you how to create an automation a slightly different way now. Here we have our due date column. Okay, this is a date column. You can add date columns of your own by clicking on the plus here and adding a date column. And on this date column, if I come to the 3 dots here and then settings, I can actually set due date reminders. Okay, now what happens when I click on this is it's going to sort of create like a back door into the automation center for me. And what's nice about clicking here is that it creates most of the automation already. You can see up the top here, it says, this is a pre-built template. Now that means that I can't actually make that many changes here. I can't completely customize things, but it's actually quite useful because it saves me a lot of time. Even creating the automations have been automated, which is pretty amazing. So a lot of these things don't need me to fill in so much information, right? What I want to do is create a reminder on some of these tasks. In fact, on all of these tasks, so that when they, or let's say a couple of days before they are due, I'm going to get a notification telling me I need to do something about this. So as we saw last time, we need to click on the underlined word where it says when. When exactly do we want this notification? You can pick in slots of up to 15 minutes when you want the notification to arrive. But in fact, I think in our case, we do want to add this option. We want it to be a little bit before the due date arrives, maybe a day or even 2 days before the due date arrives at, let's say, I don't know, 9 o'clock in the morning. Sound good? So we'll be reminded with enough time to actually get on it and make sure this task is completed. One of the benefits of using this automation recipe, right, it's a template, is that I don't need to choose the date column. I mean, in fact, we only have one date column on this board, so we only see one and we've got nothing to choose from. But if you have a lot of date columns, maybe you're also tracking other things related to date and other date columns that you've already renamed and customized, then you wouldn't need to pick it because it's already selected the one that we've added this automation to. And now we get the option to add what's called a condition. Rather than it being relevant for every single item on this board, we can add a little bit more detail. Now it's suggesting and priority is something, but actually I think a logical option here might be and status is not done. Because the last thing we want to do is be working hard, marking off tasks as done, and then all of a sudden having a reminder like this, kind of resurfacing those done tasks. Being reminded about zombie tasks, no, they've been marked as done, they should stay in the done group, and we should forget about them. This way, it's adding that condition so that we won't be bothered by something we already completed, maybe more than 2 days ahead of time. Great, so that's the trigger, and now we have our first condition. And now we still need the action itself, notify someone. When I click on notify, I can actually create the content of the notification. And as you can see here, it's actually dynamic. We can pull information from the board. So I can say things like, hi, person in charge. And this will be then pulling the name of the person that we've assigned to this task on the board. And it will be dynamic, depending on who we've chosen, their name will appear here in place of items person in charge. The task you are in charge of, I can put the name of the task, is due in 2 days. I know it's due in 2 days because that's when this is being triggered. And its current status is status. Please be sure to complete it on time. Here you can choose if you want to be nice and friendly or you want to be super passive aggressive. You can you can create the content of these as however you want to. But this nice thing is that it is dynamic and therefore will relate to whatever the item is. Amazing. And then the final step of this automation is to choose who should be notified. We can pick a specific person, someone in our team that we've already invited to our account. It could be you if you always want to be known when a task is maybe at risk, or we can assign whoever has been assigned, we can notify, whoever's been assigned in our person in charge column. And that's what I think we'll do in this case. So now we've created our second automation, and it should appear here in just a moment, next to our old one. Let's just close and reopen. I'm being a bit impatient. Let's refresh the page. There we go. Two automations side by side with all the details we need to know, both turned on and ready to be triggered. Now, this notification is going to be an in-platform notification, right? It's going to send a notification via Monday itself. What I might want to do is actually email someone instead, because when you're getting started on Monday, maybe you're not checking in on Monday all the time. Maybe you still want to be given those external reminders. So let's duplicate this entire automation. And actually, I apologize. We can't do it by duplication, of course. I was going to say we should duplicate it and change it from notification to email. But we can't do that through the way we built it, right? Because we used the pre-built template. I'm forgetting. So we're not going to use the duplicate method. Instead, we'll just create a brand new template. So let's come here to create. It's just taking a bit of a long time to load today. Always when you're doing a live demo that things are just a little bit slower than you'd like. Okay, great. So let's create a new automation here. The trigger of this one will be the same, right? We use the same date arrives option, and we're just creating basically what we had through that automatic template. We're just doing it the manual way. 2 days before when the date arrives at 9 o'clock. Which date? Here we do have to pick it, the due date column. Here I'll add the condition, and only if status is not already done. Then, now previously we had notify, right? Sending a notification within Monday. But if I type in email, you see I have two options for sending a notification via an email account, either Outlook or Gmail, whichever one of these you use. I mean, they're both free, so if you're not using them yet, you can create an account with them. Let's use my Gmail account. When I see the word, the icon rather, for Gmail, I can choose which of my accounts I want the email to be sent from. I can also use a new account. If it's the first time you're setting this up, obviously you won't see existing email addresses here. You'll just need to put in your account. You need to put in your username and password, and you need to check a box saying that you give Monday and Gmail permission to speak to each other. But it's very easy to do that. And then we can pick the email account we want to use. And just like with the notification here, we can build the content of the email. So I can say something like task reminder, and then the same thing. Hi, person in charge, the task you're assigned to, blah, 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 blah. And I can pull these fields from the board. And then who do I want to send it to? Again, it could be someone in my account, or I can pull from an email column. If you have an email address in your board, well, then you can pull from whatever email address is there. We don't, so it's asking, do you want to add one? And I can add it from right here in the automations. But for now, we could say, for example, always send me an email 2 days before a task is due, because I just want to be really in the loop. Of course, we can come and change this later on. If you start working entirely in Monday, you maybe don't need an email reminder like this, but that would be how we can create something along those lines, both a notification and an email. All right, maybe I'll show one more automation and then come down to the chat and check out some of the questions that you've been sending there. So the next automation that I would love to show you is going to help us organize this board. Currently, we have these 3 groups, this week, next week, and done. And we have an automation already to move stuff into the done group when the status changes to done. But there's nothing at the moment that connects this week and next week with the date column. And that's easy to fix. For example, maybe I want to make sure that automatically the tasks which are this week will move up into the this week group. How would I do that? Well, we'll come back to the Automation Center. I'm going to create another automation from scratch. I'm not going to use a recipe this time. And I'm going to say for my trigger, when a date arrives, and for my action, moving an item to a group. So we're kind of combining half of the last 2 automations into one. Which date? The due date. And just like before, when on the due date? Well, not at all on the due date. In fact, quite a long time before. In fact, I want it to be 1 week before the due date arrives. This one, maybe I'll put, closer to midnight. Let's say 1:15 midnight. Then move the item to the group this week. So again, 1 week before, whatever date has been written in that column, it's going to automatically move it up into the group of this week. Now, again, we're probably going to want to add a condition because remember, this is going to be creating my zombie tasks. We want to add that same condition. So I'll click on the plus here, but only if the status is not already done. Now, keep in mind that if you've customized your solution, maybe you have other statuses, no longer relevant, already passed to the marketing department. Maybe they're not called done, but you can add in those conditions here as well, so that you're not recycling old stuff that's already been completed. You want to be rewarded for completing the work, not creating more for us. So you just need to think about that when you're setting up your automation. All right, lovely. So we've already seen 4 automations, which is great. And what I think I'll do now before we move on to our 5th and final automation that I'll show you here on this board is take a look at the questions in the chat. So, okay, Mary asked a great question. Can you take an existing automation and amend it to your needs? You bet. So if, for example, you download a template and it already has an automation in it, it would look just like this. If you inherit a board from somebody else, or maybe you built one in the past and you want to just make a change, whether we created it a few seconds ago, 15 minutes ago, or 10 years ago, you can click on it and you can make changes. It's not a problem at all. There may be issues around permissions, but in which case you would just need to make sure that the owner of the automation gives you permission to make those changes. But from a technical point of view, absolutely you can amend automations, no problem at all. Okay, Anna asks a great question. Anna asks, can you use 2 triggers in one automation? Or do you have to create 2 different automations, i.e. if status is priority or pending, notify? So you can't have 2 triggers. That is a fact. There needs to be 1 concrete trigger. In the example that you gave, it's really, we're talking, I think, if I understood the question right, about 2 conditions. Now, there isn't an option for an or condition, right? So your example was priority or pending. So maybe in our case, it would be like if status is not done or is not, we decided not to do it. If I click on the plus here, the only option that appears is and only if, meaning it would need to be not done and also not stuck, for example. It would be both of those things in this option. If you wanted it to be an or option, so either not done or not stuck, then you're exactly right. You're already thinking along the right lines. You would simply need to create another automation. But that would be very easy to do because we have that duplicate option, right? So I could take this one here, duplicate it. This time I'll just, with 1 click, change it from done to stuck and save. So we now have 2 automations running side by side. They're not using the or function, but they are achieving the same thing, right? If it's this or this, it's going to happen the same way. So great question. I like the kind of logic way you're working there. As I create another automation, I know some people may be thinking, oh my goodness, but we're going to end up with so many automations. And how are we going to keep track of them? And are there any automation limits? First thing, of course, you can add descriptions, just like we did with our first one. So you can keep a record of your automations and remember them more clearly. And your limit to the number of automations you can use in Monday is pretty darn generous. On the standard non-profit plan, you have 25,000 automations per month that you can rely on, right? So every time one of these runs, it's one automation, and 25,000 is a huge number. I really don't know any nonprofit that's even kind of approaching that number. So you can really go crazy. And if you need to have one for status is stuck, one for status is done, go for it. It's really not a problem. Okay, hi there for the folks who are just introducing themselves in the chat. So hi to Jamil, that's great to have you in the call. And then Caitlin asks, is there a way to create an automation for subsection due dates? So you'll notice that for some more complex tasks, like this one here, we have like micro tasks within the main item. So finishing the grant application is the overall task, but we've kind of delegated these smaller tasks. You'll notice that if I come here to the settings, we don't have the same options in this date column as we did in this date column, where we were able to add the date reminder. If I come here, say when date arrives, you'll see that I do have the option of creating it based on the date column from our main columns or the date column from our sub-item columns. So yes, is the short answer, Caitlin. You can create an automation based off this date as well. So if you do have sub-items, then exactly as you've done for the main items, you'd probably want to do for the sub-items, right? If it's a task or project management use case like this, where you're breaking things down into smaller bites, you wouldn't want to miss those smaller bites. So yes, we can say when a sub-item date arrives, or again, 2 days before it arrives, remind me as well. But yeah, that's also a great question. Okay, one last question's come through here in the chat, and I'll answer that before moving on to another couple of interesting uses. Can you upload existing spreadsheets and automate that in Monday? And the answer is yes, of course. I love questions like this. There are two main ways you can upload data into Monday. And it depends if you want to bring data into an existing board. Why would you want it to come into an existing board? If you've already started doing work, if you've downloaded a template that you like, if you want to fit into someone else's work, then you would come to the little drop down here and you can import items. And you would just be then mapping the columns from your spreadsheet and telling them to go in the same place as whatever column you have on the board. If, on the other hand, you want to create a brand new board based off the way your spreadsheet looked, well, then over here in your main menu, you can click on the plus and import data. And you've got a few more variety of sources here. The most easy, though, is to update from an Excel or a CSV. And then you are basically just telling Monday what to do with each of the columns on your spreadsheet. Either in the first option, map it to an existing column, or in this second option, create me a new column based on the way my existing spreadsheet looked. And then in terms of automations, yeah, any automations you add to that board, once an item is in Monday, and it doesn't matter where it came from in some sense, right? If you created it yourself or uploaded it, it's an item. If the trigger meets the conditions that apply to that item, then it will be triggered. So yes, is the short answer. Thanks, Anna. All right, great questions, my friends. I will return to questions at the end, so don't worry. But what I'd love to do now is show you a bit more of a complex flow around automations. We're kind of building our way up there. The next one I want to show you is what you can do with recurring tasks. Now, this could work for a simple task management board like this, but also for something like, grant management. If you're applying to grants and the same grant, has an intake every 6 months and you want it to automatically repeat, it's the same information basically as a task or a grant. So for our example, let's use something a bit simple, but I like it. Watering the office plants. Plants are important, right? Help everybody keep clear ahead, eating up our CO2. We want to make sure they're watered once a week. So it's a low priority, but it's due on the 12th of June. I'm the person in charge, and I go and I notice that they're a little bit dry. This week, they seem especially dry, watered a day early. Okay, so I'm watering them a day early, and I'm leaving a little note on this item. Now, of course, you could be saving the world with these items. This is just a bit of a stupid example, but hopefully it gets the point across clearly. What I'm going to do now, before I even add the automation, is I'm going to customize the board a little bit. I want to add here another column. I'm going to add another status column, but it's not going to track done working on it and stuck. I'm going to customize this status column to show the recurrence rate. I can never spell recurrence. I write this a couple of times a week. There we go, recurrence rate. And I'm going to edit these labels to show how often this task recurs, weekly, monthly, annually, etc. I can customize these labels, change the colors. If I want to, it's not a problem at all. Maybe I won't do that because it's the same color as stuck. And this is, as we said, the watering of office plants, a weekly task. I'm doing this because it's going to act as my condition. It's going to keep the other tasks from moving around when I create the next, in fact, 2 automations. So I'm going to return to our old faithful center, the automations up here, and click on create automation. This is going to be a pretty simple first automation. I'm going to say when the status changes to done, but only if the recurrence status is set to weekly, then duplicate the item. I can choose to duplicate it with or without updates. And my advice in this use case would be without updates. What we're going to be doing here is keeping one item where we can see when it was completed, if there are any updates, any notes, who completed it, and so on. We want to keep that information somewhere, just as a record. And the new item that's been created by this automation will have some of those similar characteristics, but things like the updates, they're going to be unique to the original item. So we're going to duplicate it without the updates. And I'm going to create this automation. So I've got half of the way there. The first iteration of this watering of the plants gets moved down to done, and we have a new one created as a result. Now, you might think I could add more actions here that would start to reset this new item. But the actions that I add here will apply to the existing item. So what I need to do is add a new automation, our 7th automation. And what I'm going to do in this automation is basically create a series of conditions so that only items that have been created via the previous automation are going to be kind of reset and move back up to the top group for upcoming work. So I will say, when an item is created, but not just any item, when an item is created and only if the item is in the group or done, now you could pick a different condition here. At the moment, though, this works perfectly. There's no other way in our existing flow that an item could be created in the done group. So doing it this way, at the moment, is a good condition. If the flow was to change, you'd need to change this. You could think of other ways that this could work, but this right now will do just fine. So now we're talking about the new item that we've just had created. What do we want it to do? Well, we want it to move back up to the top group because it's a weekly recurring task. We also want to push the due date by 7 days. We also want to change the status, right? It's going to be marked as done. We want to set that back to not yet started. And we want to clear a column. We want to clear the column which says person in charge, because someone new might well take on this task next week. So again, this is now going to be a whole lot of actions applied only to that newly created item from the previous automation, and it's going to kind of reset it for next week. So we've created our last two automations here on this board, and I want to show you this one in action, assuming that I've set it up correctly. So here it is, our watering of the office plants. It's got an update, I'm in charge, it's got a date, and it's a weekly recurring task. So pay attention, because it's going to happen quite fast if it works properly. I'm going to mark it as done, and several things should happen, right? First of all, it should move to the done group and duplicate. Let's see. It's been marked as done. It has moved to the done group and duplicated. Now let's see if the rest of it will clear out properly. It hasn't. Let's take a look at why that is. I think I can see why. Maybe we have this automation here, this old one, which is kind of working on it at the same time. Right, this one is trying to move the item to done, and this one is trying to move the item to done as well. So maybe these two are kind of working at the same time. So we could maybe turn this one off and see if that works. So let's move this back up here and delete this item. This was the newly created one. Change its status again. And we'll try marking this one as done now. All right, firstly, it should move to the done group. Again, it's duplicated it in this group. Why is that going wrong? Let's take a look here. Oh, because I simply built it wrong. I should have said, first of all, move the item to the done group. Man, that must have been confusing for you folks. I apologize. And then duplicate the item without the updates. Well, that's a very simple mistake. I was telling you before that the condition of the previous automation would work because the item has been created and done, but it hasn't because we didn't set it up correctly. Now we are working properly. When the status changes to done, and if it's recurring, it's going to move it to done and then duplicate the item. It was a good bit of troubleshooting though. And then the second automation will be applicable. So let's try that again. Okay. Third time's a charm, eh? Here we go. Now it should move the item to the done group. Still didn't do it. Oh my goodness, what have I done wrong here? I promise you it's easy. No, it just didn't update this automation. Fourth time's a charm, you know what they say. I did click on save last time, right? Let's check that that's actually worked. Move item to done and duplicate. Okay, it looks good now. Here goes nothing. All right, we'll try this time. It's got to work, right, folks? Mark the status as done. It should move to the done group and then duplicate itself. Perfect. Now a new item has been created in the done group, so it will move up to the top. The person in charge will clear. The date will be pushed by a week, and the status will change to not yet started. Okay, took a while to get there, but that's purely because I set this up wrong. That's a pretty nice solution. Now, the one piece of manual work you would need to do is just manually come in here and remove the word copy. It does create the word copy. There's nothing we can do about it. It doesn't hurt your flow in any way. It's totally fine to have the word copy there. If you're anything like me, though, that would drive you crazy, and you will need to spend half a second removing the word copy from anything which is duplicated in this way. But that, my friends, is how we can manage recurring tasks or any other thing which needs to recur in, I think, a pretty simple way. Apologize, it didn't look as easy as it maybe should have because I set it up wrong to begin with. But that is a pretty simple little automation. Great. So what I want to do now, my friends, is move on to a different use case and show you just a couple more simple automations. I'm going to look at a volunteer management use case now. This use case sees volunteers registering using a form, okay? Right, you can create forms on any Monday board, and once they fill it out, certain things can happen, okay? So this form can be shared publicly. People can register for an event using a form. They can show their interest in your nonprofit. They can suggest they want to be a volunteer. And we've got a couple of a couple of automations on this volunteer board that I wanted to show you. Starting with these two. So we have two automations. Sorry, these two. I wish they were in order, but they're not. We have two automations which are going to be used to set the approval of our volunteers. For example, if the manager approval is what changes first, and the volunteer has already said that they are ready to work, then they will be marked as approved. But equally, if the volunteer is the thing that changes first to yes, and the manager has already been marked as approved, then the volunteer will move to the approved group. The reason I'm showing you this is how you can basically require two green lights based off that same logic of a trigger. Here we have a volunteer who hasn't yet approved that they are ready to start working, but the manager has done an interview and says they're good to go. Here we have a volunteer who's the opposite. The volunteer has said, I'm ready, but the manager hasn't done the approval. But whether we mark this one green, she'll move down, or we mark this one green, she will move down. Basically, it's a way of saying we need two green lights. We have those two different automations. Each one is going to control for whichever one turns first. And you can do that same logic with many, many different automations. Now, the next automation is a little bit more complicated. That's really, really fun. On this board, I have another form, and our volunteers here can fill out when they've completed some work. They let us know the work they've done, and they've filled out this form, again, online, without necessarily knowing what's going on in our Monday account. When they fill that form out, using the match automation, it's going to look to see if a certain field that we suggest already exists in our database. And if it does, it's going to connect them for us. So for example, Ada Lovelace completed a 10-hour biology course in August. She entered in the form her email address, which is a unique value. And the match automation looked to see if this email address already existed back in our main database. It did find the email address, and so it's connected the two together. That's called, my friends, the match automation, and it is my favorite of all the automations. Now, this is a little bit more complicated, but by now you should be automation masters. This is an automation, by the way, which you cannot build yourself. We have to take this automation from the list of pre-built automations here in the recipes. We take an automation like a match automation, and it comes in a pre-built package. It says, when an item is created in this board, so as soon as something is created, when someone fills out the form, for example, it creates an item. It's going to try and connect the item using the connect board column, where two columns of our choice, one on this board and another column in another board, match exactly. That's why, by the way, I recommended using the email address rather than, for example, a name, because it needs to be a character by character match. And if so, it's going to add the item to the matched item on our database. So let's see that one in action, because it's a pretty cool automation. Let's imagine that we are indeed Ada Lovelace, filling out a form. We completed some work for our organization today. We did a class in Newcastle. It was a biology class that we taught as a volunteer to students. It was a 3-hour-long class, and we enter in our email address perfectly, making sure we don't make any spelling mistakes. And as soon as I click on submit, again, several things will happen quite quickly. an item will be created, and the match automation should look to see if Ada is in our database. And if she is, it will connect her to the list. Let's take a look. All right, here is Ada's piece of work. 3 hours. It's looking to see, and there, I don't even know if you noticed, it was so fast. When the item was created, it was blank, and then Ada's name appeared here automatically. The match automation unlocks so much potential in Monday, because what it does is it allows people who are not inside your account, like maybe your hundreds of volunteers, to be able to enter information via a form, not see your account or make changes to your data or have access to anything personal. But using the match automation, it can connect, for example, Ada's 3 hours of a biology class to her overall profile. And over here in her overall profile, we are now going to see that new piece of work has been added here automatically. And the total hours that Ada has worked has gone up by 3. And we did nothing apart from set up the original automation to make that happen. So that is why, my friends, the match automation is my absolute favorite. It's such a powerful automation, and it really does unlock a lot of potential. Excellent. So, my friends, we are almost out of time, and there's still a lot of questions unanswered. So what I'm going to try and do is whiz through as many questions as possible before we have to wrap things up and say goodbye. And I do apologize in advance if we can't get to everyone's question before the end of the session. Okay. Dimitri, how are you doing? Can you set up automations to email external people, not on your account? Yes, as long as the email address is in your board. So, for example, here are our volunteers. We have their email addresses. The automation could say, when your volunteer marks themselves as approved, send an email to this address. They don't have to be in your account. As long as you have the email address, that is no problem. Okay, Josh is asking about like future training and that kind of thing with me or other people. So because of the scale we're working at, I can't offer, private one-on-one consultations, but we do have a whole lot of extra resources that we do offer outside of these webinars with TechSoup. So yeah, I understand the sensitivity around that, Josh, but I'm happy to give it a quick shout out. If you go to that same page, monday.com/nonprofits, you'll find our resource center. And there you'll find a whole lot of different free trainings that we're providing for nonprofits. The other thing I can say that is available one-on-one, free of charge, 24/7, is our amazing customer support. If you click up here on the question mark in your account, you click on chat with us, 24/7, 365, even on leap years, 366, you can talk to a Monday professional. It starts off with an AI bot, but you can also upgrade and speak to a human for free any time of day or night if you have any issues. So yes, you're welcome to join me for future sessions and group consultations. But if you have actual troubleshooting in the moment, that's an amazing resource, and I'm very happy that you asked the question, Josh. It's not a problem to ask. So all good there. Okay, Mary asked a similar question to the earlier one. Is there a way to send staff an email reminder several tasks are approaching? Or will this only work as an individual task? So basically, Mary, it depends how you've set up your automations and how you've set up your board. But if each individual task is its own individual line item, then yes, it would send you a new reminder for each individual task. The way that the automations work is on an item by item level. So it's like, has the trigger been met for this item? Then it launches. Has the trigger been met for this item? Then it launches. So if you've grouped your tasks together in some way, it would work differently. But yeah, by default, it would be one automation per item and therefore one per task. Okay, Dimitri has another good one. With your example of assigning someone to a task, is it possible to make it occur on a certain basis? For example, can I assign John to water the plants every other week and assign Jane every other week in between? So if I return to my weekly tasks board, we could say something like, when something happens, let's say a date, assign a certain person as the assignee. So it could be every 7 days, assign, or on the date in the board, assign John, and then have another date 7 days later and assign Jane. This is, I guess, the kind of thing your brain starts to get used to doing, thinking in ways that an automation can work, right? It is definitely possible. You just need to think about ways that the automation will understand what you're looking for. So if you, for example, added a date column on the board, so it's like first date, second date, then you can have them in sync, and Jane will do one and John will do the other. It's a great way of thinking. I like that question, Dimitri. It's cool. Thanks for those people who were helping me troubleshoot. I wasn't looking at the chat at the time, but I appreciate the suggestions, and I also appreciate the people enjoyed watching me troubleshooting. That's very encouraging that it was useful. Okay, Joanne asks, can you import a Google form into Monday.com? So, of course, the first thing I would say is move on to a Monday form. You have an unlimited number of Monday forms, and Monday forms are the same thing as a Monday board, like we saw with the example of the volunteer. Somebody registers as a volunteer, the information arrives in the board, so it's completely seamless. Of course, however, if you've got your data that has arrived through a Google form in a compatible format, then yes, you could bring it into Monday, the raw data, like the answers people have given. Importing the questions, and that's not possible just because the questions aren't in a format that's intelligible to a different system, right? If you've got data, yes. If you've got a form itself, you'd need to add those questions in, so that's a bit trickier. Amazing. Thanks everyone for the questions. Thanks Bailey, by the way, for giving a shout out to the future sessions that I'm offering. I would hope to see everyone attend the future sessions. We've got 2 office hour sessions coming up on the 17th and the 24th. Definitely wanted to give those a mention, and especially in relation to Josh's question. If you do have more questions, you wanted to talk about these things in a bit more depth, then absolutely. We have these 2 special sessions dedicated exclusively for folks who join up through TechSoup. You're all welcome to join. You can wait and see how many interesting ideas come up and bring them to me, or just come and listen to other people's questions. It's totally up to you. But thank you, Bailey, for keeping me honest and making sure I remember to plug those, because they're really cool events, and it's a pretty unique thing to be able to also come back and ask those kind of questions in a more open forum. All right, my friends. So look, we've already gone 2 minutes over time, so I think I am going to have to wrap up today's session there. I know there are still 1 or 2 questions that remain unanswered. I apologize. I hope that you can find your answers by clicking on the question mark there and finding the resources you need. And I really do hope, most of all, that you found this session a bit inspiring. You've seen the ways that automations can really help the way your nonprofit can work. You've seen how easy they are to set up and how fun they are to customize, right? You can really quickly make tweaks, personalizations, and make them work for you. And as I always say, we want those automatic things being done by the robots, giving you the free time to have real impact in your communities and make those personal connections like only human beings can. So I'm going to stop there. I want to finish by saying thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to the folks from TechSoup for having us. And maybe I'll see you again in one of those upcoming office hour sessions. Bye for now.